I think play is such a huge part of getting to the point where you want to set your goals. Find out what you love before going, well, I better do that because that'll pay this and I'll be able to, do you know what I mean?
Welcome to Hack Circus. This week's guest is Steve Faulkner. Steve I came across as a magic performer and speaker in Sheffield a few years ago, but he's also a business coach. Steve's had a really interesting background. He's an amazing close-up magician. He was Magic Circle Close-Up Magician of the Year. He won the International Magic Championship. He's probably the best magician I've ever seen, but he's also an expert in leadership. And Steve has this thing about just being really good at things. His website is getgoodatstuff.com, and he's a real expert in getting good at stuff. He's progressed to extraordinary levels of expertise in a really broad range of things, from personal training to juggling to magic, and now, as I say, leadership, and also, as you'll find out, some other more surprising hobbies too. Steve is really interesting, really entertaining, and just a nice chat. I love talking to him. I really enjoy our chats, and I hope this will come across and you'll enjoy it too. Steve is on Twitter as Faulkner Steve, and as I say, you can find out more about his work at getgoodatstuff.com. He's really interested in self-development, basically, and knows a lot about this in a very pragmatic way. He can be really helpful. He's not just preaching empty platitudes. He knows this stuff because he's tried it, and that's why he is so good at so many things. If you are enjoying these shows, please go to iTunes and give it a quick rating. If you have a bit more time, a review would be brilliant also. And if you don't have any time, just mention it to a friend next time the subject of podcasts come up, because word of mouth counts for so much. And basically, the more people that listen and know about this show, the more I can make. I have pledged to make 50 episodes at least, and there will be one every week. So that's my commitment to you. In between episodes, you can enjoy updates from Hack Circus on our Twitter, which is Hack Circus, on Instagram, which is Hack Circus, on Facebook, it's Hack Circus Podcast, and Snapchat is Hack Circus as well, and the website is hackcircuspodcast.com. So I hope you enjoy and are as inspired by this episode as I was. Let me know if you were. Get in touch on any of those channels. It's always good to chat to you guys, and I'll see you again next week. Okay, let's get on with it.
Well, I'm a leadership coach, first and foremost at the moment, I think, and it's a kind of mix between leadership training and business coaching. So I sit with people quite a lot and listen to them in a kind of more Gestalt way, which is a little bit similar to counselling. So I spend the first couple of sessions just listening to people talk and sort of guiding them a little bit, but really unpacking what's going on for them. And then you start bringing in models and not guidance and advice or anything like that, but different ways of looking at their situations, which can be quite helpful.
I know you from magic, really, from seeing you perform around Sheffield. When did you first progress from magic, and how did that come about?
So I was sort of at a bit of a time when I'd spent a lot of time trying to get magic gigs, and that's what I wanted to do. And I had kids and got to the point where I was getting a little bit tired of sort of getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning and wiping out the next day. I was kind of hands-on dad, so I'm not the sort of person that would get home at 3 o'clock in the morning and get out of bed 3 o'clock the next day to recover. I'd get up and sort the kids out and all that kind of stuff. And I just realised I wasn't feeling that happy, and I was getting all the gigs and all that stuff, and I then went and sat down and kind of like I'd learned on leadership courses and stuff, and sort of really unpack what I want at the moment. And I realised I didn't really want to do what I was doing for the next 20 years. So I was doing close-up magic gigs, corporate events, which I still do and I still love, but I didn't want it to be the be-all and end-all. The older you get, the sort of less attractive that lifestyle becomes. So I wanted something to do in the daytime. I was doing a few talks at events. I'd turn up to events and they said, can you talk about this? And I was really interested in self-development. I had been for a couple of years by that point. And I was doing talks and different conferences and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, actually, if I do more of that, I'm going to be getting home at 6 o'clock in the evening. It's weekdays, it's daytimes. I'd spent years as a street performer, working every bank holiday, every Saturday and Sunday. And it just became a little bit not in congruence with what I wanted to live. I wanted to be with the kids at weekends. And so I slowly started thinking about doing more of that stuff and pushing for that.
So it was sort of to do with managing your own time, as it felt like it was getting out of control maybe initially as well, not just managing your time, but sort of taking control of your own life. And
yeah.
But I guess especially with something like magic that's so intensive, you must already have all this knowledge about how to really kind of really apply yourself to something, and like your website, isn't it, getgoodатstuff.com? Yeah. So you already kind of have this amazing foundation of like, I know that if I just spend enough hours on this, or like read enough books and really focus on it, at the expense of other things maybe, then I can get to it. Yeah,
absolutely. And the whole get good at stuff thing, which was, I mean, it's always been my thing. When I was growing up, I had a bit of a reputation of kind of being the kid that was good at stuff. I would take a skill and get really good at it. And actually, it wasn't. People said, "Oh yeah, anything you do, you can do really well." It actually wasn't the case. The criteria was I had to love it. That's it. But then I was happy to sit and I was never talented at stuff. I never, where people say that you pick stuff up really quickly. I never really did that. It was always hard. I was always quite cack-handed at everything I did. So it was always a bit of a slog, where you do see people that, I've got a real problem with talent, because I don't think it's talent. There's people that can pick stuff up quicker. And I think we can all get to the same place. It might take some people longer, but it is that mindset of going, if I want to do that and I like it enough, I'll be able to do it. Which can be a bit of a problem, because I do have like way too many hobbies and stuff. So, I've just started learning the piano and I've gone, well, I know I can get good at that. But actually I haven't really got time. So I bought a piano and I get really frustrated that I haven't got time to do it. And now someone else, I've either got to let go of it. Do you know what I mean? So it's this sort of help and a hindrance, really. Yeah.
You've had this taste of like the excitement of being proficient at something. It's like a lot of people never get to that, and sort of, because you've had it, you're like, now I can get proficient at anything. Like the world's my oyster, and suddenly you just want to grab it. Yeah, it can be a problem in that way, I suppose.
Well, yeah, because when you're growing up, you've got loads of time, and I didn't always do loads of stuff. I tended to get really into something heavily and do nothing else. So it was breakdancing was the first one. Like when I was like 11, my mum came back with a breakdancing video, and I wasn't a really popular kid. I talk about this in my talk. I was like, I didn't really do anything. Like my brother was quite sporty and quite cool, and I didn't do anything. And my parents were kind of knew that, like when your kid's like 11, they still doesn't do any sport or anything. So they were always trying to get me into stuff. And I got this breakdancing video called Breakdance, You Can Do It. And I remember sitting when I was living in Bristol. And I remember trying really hard and just getting nowhere, because I wasn't athletic. I didn't have that body. And then all of a sudden one day on the school field, I just popped this breakdancing move. And it was really powerful, because obviously in my memory it was a really short period of time, but very quickly it seemed that I had an identity. I was the kid who could breakdance. And in my head at the time, I learned that, I think because my brain was a little sponge, sort of understanding who I was and how the world worked, I kind of went, right, so if I do something really badly, if I keep doing it, it will just happen. And it was like that. It wasn't like a slow learning thing. It was like I couldn't do it, and then bang, I could do. And then I did that with all the other breakdancing stuff, and I became, in my head, a cool kid, because I was a breakdancer. People used to watch me breakdance. People said, "Oh, Steve can break that," And that was quite powerful, I think, at that age. And I think I got a little bit addicted to that thing that if you can get really good at stuff, you get a bit of an identity with it. It's almost like a little bit of weird fame at school, and you know what I mean? It's like everybody think, so then I got, skateboarding and stuff like that. And like compared to nowadays, I wasn't like, I've just started skateboarding again as well, which is hilarious. But I was in my little town, I was like the best at that. And so I became Steve, that guy that skateboards, you know what I mean? It was and I think that's
so brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a bit shallow, and as a kid it's great. But then when you're 43 and you've still got that same mentality, and you've got 2 kids and you've got 3 days a week to work, so I've got the kids all the time, and I'm picking up all these I considered buying a yo-yo the other day, and I was like, Steve, for fuck's sake. Like, you can't... You've got people that want your time. You know, like,
do you have to stay away from certain shops and like...
I can't go to... I can't go to magic conventions anymore, really, because I've got like every magician will know this, but I've got like stuff on my shelves that I bought 5 years ago that I thought I'm going to learn that when I get home, and that'll be a great routine for stage, and it's still sitting there. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually going back to that stuff, and I am picking it up, and which is really good to do. But if I go to Blackpool Magic Convention or something, I'll come back with 400 quid worth of shit that will take me another 4 years to learn, and so I just don't go, you know. So, which is really bad because it's a real shame. The reason I did things like magic, skateboarding, juggling, all those things is because you could do them on your own and for hours at end. I was never interested in sports where you needed to rely on someone else. You know, the idea of going and playing a game for 40 minutes of squash or something was ridiculous. I wanted to spend 6 hours doing something. Yeah, no, I did those things because I loved the way that you could very quickly get feedback off of what you were doing. So you could do it, and you see little improvements. The breakdancing thing's a bit different, but with magic you do see improvements quite quickly. So I was addicted to that feeling of flow. If you read the book Flow?
No, I haven't. You mentioned it before.
Yeah. So it's that thing of this guy Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote this book called it's basically The Science of Happiness. And he said it's about that flow state that we get when we're doing something, when we're so into it, we don't know what time it is, and we forget everything around us that exists, and all of a sudden 5 hours has passed, and it's that feeling I think you get with stuff like that, where I can pick something up, get really geeky about it, and like a day's gone, you know, and I don't really get that with sports and things like that, or activities that, and don't get me wrong, I do love hanging out with people and doing that, but when it comes to practicing skills, I like to, you know, get into it for hours.
Yeah, I thought like with magic, it's quite interesting that it is something that you do. You can obviously you have to practice it for forever, and then you kind of produce something that might take less than a second. That's you know been years of work probably for that one thing. But also it's that like. It's almost like the payoff isn't really the sharing. Like you share it with the public, but you presumably, you know, there are easier ways to be an entertainer. If all you want to do is impress people or to like, get like people to like you or people to like come and see your show, you could do rubbish stand-up comedy or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think stand-up is actually quite similar for a lot of people. I think there's also that geeky side of stand-up, which is you get into the, you know, that side of it, which is all, you know, learning about callbacks and learning about all the things. I mean, I did stand up and I do arguably a stand-up show now, meaning I'm standing up in front of an audience. I've done it in comedy clubs. It's magic, and so a lot of stand-ups will hate the idea of them, you know, somebody doing magic in the comedy club, but. I got into it for about a year in London, and the frustration for me as well is that I couldn't do it every night. You know, you get an open spot, and you've got to wait 6 months for your open spot. And the same reason with surfing, I got into surfing, and I couldn't bear the fact I couldn't do it every day because there weren't waves every day. So to the idea of waiting 2 or 3 weeks to do something was really annoying. And then that's why I love Covent Garden. When I went to Covent Garden, you could perform every day. Even if it was shit, you know what I mean? You could go out and do it, and that's why I became a street performer, because I could work on my show every day, and I didn't have to do that thing of waiting 2 weeks. And yeah, so it's definitely that thing of, I suppose, constant, you know, practice and being able to do that to get to that level of getting good at something. And yeah,
there's an episode of this podcast that's about a dance as well, with 2 professional dancers that I interview in a car while they're in between things, really busy. But they were saying the same things, similar things to what you're saying, that they're just so. The reason that they do it is just because they love it, and there's no sort of special thing that makes you good at dance. It's just like, if you have that excitement about what you're doing and that kind of love and that need to do it all the time, like you're just like, you get up next day and go, when can I dance? When can, like, let me do it, you know. Yeah. It's really, in a way though, it's a bit unhealthy, I guess, because you get into these hobbies that just let you close off the rest of your life to everything.
Yeah, I know. And I think the older you get, that becomes more important because you seem to have less time. so I have to be very careful about going down those routes and going, I have to always look at outcomes all the time. I sit there and I do outcomes models and I go, right, what do I want in the next 4 months? Well, if playing the piano isn't one of those things, then I can't spend 4 hours a day doing it. Do you know what I mean? Because I have the kids 40% of the time. I try not to work when I'm with them or disappear into my own head while I'm with them. So I've only really got 3 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week max to do what I need to do, and that's everything. So I think I have to be really careful in sort of going, okay, that would be really good fun, and I'll do 20 minutes of it, but I can't do that today. I've got to think about actually work and earning money, and which is a constant source of frustration for me. It's not a cocky thing. I know I'm not capable of everything. I know I'm not. It's not about being a gold medal Olympian. It's about sort of getting to a level that you're happy with in stuff. And usually for me, that's a level where I feel like I can do it as a job, to a professional level. So I come
quite a high level, really.
I suppose so. But I think with coaching, I think the main thing I come across, and the main thing is unlocking, is that self-doubt that people have, because they weren't lucky enough for maybe their mum to come back with a breakdancing video at that age where you just sort of, you know what I mean? It's and I think that's why I'm starting to think about going into schools and stuff like that, because I think if you come across that way of thinking when you're young, you start realising, actually, I can, it sounds a bit gung-ho, like, yeah, you can do anything, but it's that thing of, like, if something's really difficult, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just something you've got to work through, and I think a lot of adults and kids, that I meet have that thing of the minute something feels a bit tough, if they haven't got a boss literally going, well, you can't go because you'll lose your job, they quit. So it's that thing of that self-motivation of going, no, this is okay, it feels shit, it feels horrible, it feels like I'm rubbish at this, but it's just something I've got to carry on doing. So it's unlocking that I find a lot in when I'm coaching. Do
you think everybody likes something and they maybe don't know what it is yet?
Yeah, I think people get caught up, and for a leadership coach it's difficult, because I talk about the importance of setting goals and stuff. In certain contexts are very important, but it isn't the be-all and end-all. It's got to be... So with certain parts of my life I have to set goals, because I know I won't do them, because it's stuff I don't like doing that much. But I think people lose that ability to play, and I think people do get hung up, sometimes even from childhood, and kind of, well, what's the point of doing something if it doesn't have an outcome? Well, going back to that flow thing, the point of doing it is because to be happy you need those situations where you're just doing something you love. And a byproduct of that sometimes is something that turns into a job, or something that gives you an idea, well, maybe if I love doing this, I could do that as a living in some way. And I think play is such a huge part of getting to the point where you want to set your goals. Find out what you love before going, well, I better do that because that'll pay this, and I'll be able to, do you know what I mean? That sort of pragmatism of setting a goal, which I think people get mixed up when I go, oh, you got to set, it's really important that you know where you want to go. Well, it is, but on the way, if you don't know, you've got to play and explore and don't, I mean, I wanted to do drama as a kid, and my career's advisor said, well, you don't want to do that, so I didn't do it, you know what I mean? But I should have just gone, fuck off, you know what I mean? Because that's what I did. I wanted to, so I had this roundabout few years of doing other stuff, and then came back to not acting, but doing some sort of performance. And so, yeah, I think that there are people that don't know what they're like, and again, some of that is really... one of the main things you do as a coach a lot of the times is really unpack what people like, is going and not what they should like or not what they should want to do, but what do you actually want, and that can take a long time, and it's like a real barrier for people when they sit down and start trying to write what they want. It's all that same stuff. It's what we should want at this point. But no, what do you actually want? What do you like doing? Well, I kind of like that. Okay, well, let's explore that. But there's a lot of guilt as well about people doing stuff just for the fun of it, especially, again, when you have kids. It's like, well, why should I do anything for me? I've got 2 kids, I've got to do it for them. And it's like, no, you've got to do your stuff to be able to do their stuff properly. Does that make sense? It's a bit rambly, but so there are a lot of people that don't know what they want and have never sat down and talked to someone for an hour about that. So it's a really nice process, and that's where I sort of shut up and just let them go a little bit.
There are things that influence the way that you think you should be and what you think you should have by now, and all these kind of problems. And it is hard for people to just kind of draw a line through that and go, I'm going to rewrite my story. You know, I'm going to tell myself something else about who I am and what I want in life. How do you kind of... I always think that one of the things with those motivational speakers, but also in general in life, is that you almost need like a sort of hypnotic effect. Like you need to sort of pass through all that resistance like very deeply. Somehow.
Yeah, and I think what they don't cover a lot... I mean, it's a very easy thing to say, you've got to rewrite them, but I think what they don't cover is that it's really fucking difficult to do. It's not an easy thing. It's not like you just tell yourself everything's going to be great. It's not. And I have huge issues and limitations. You know, when I say I don't have self-doubt, I do have massive self-doubt in some stuff. Like when I moved to Sheffield and I was a street performer, I had to learn to get my head around the idea of running a business as a magician because I didn't want to keep going to Covent Garden. And I had this thing in myself that I'm not a businessman, I'm no good at that, I don't do that. You know, that's not what I do. So I just didn't do it for ages and I didn't get any work. And it was only through going on, I've actually went on the leadership course, which I now am a facilitator on, that on the 10-day course, it managed to turn me around, and I went through a lot of processes of, you know, of not just saying to myself, but a lot of different processes of convincing myself that actually, no, what is different from you than these people that are very successful in business? Actually, when you meet them, there's no difference. They're all feeling a bit lost and kind of, you know, having the same self-doubt and stuff. And with that, it just goes back to practice and repetition. You just practice being in those situations. You practice talking to people in business. You practice it, and after a while, you become more confident and comfortable, and you realise that it's all a smokescreen. There's actually we're all walking around a bit lost and befuddled with everything, and nobody's really got it nailed. And so I think that those. So going back to your question, that idea of rewriting a thing takes a lot. It's a big process, but the thing is, once you start doing it, then you start practicing it. Over time, you start changing, and it's about changing. So I'm a totally different person than I was 15 years ago. I moved to Sheffield as thinking I had no ability in any of that stuff, and now I can walk into an organisation and talk to people, and I've never worked in an organisation, but it's just through learning and understanding how it all works. And like I always say, I always feel like a little boy in a world of adults. You know what I mean? I still have that thing where I'm kind of getting away with it, and I think to understand that is the big thing. It's to be aware of that. Is most of the battle really is to be aware of how you feel and know what those stories are that you're telling yourself before trying to change them. So in Gestalt they call it the paradoxical theory of change, where you start changing by trying not to, but by just unpacking what you are. And the minute you become aware of what your own either limiting or brilliant beliefs are, all that stuff, and really unpacking who you are, then the change starts happening automatically. So it's not about, right, I must change. It's about, okay, what must you change? And the minute you know, then it starts kicking everything into action. So it's a really interesting process.
It's kind of I imagine quite relaxing as well to say, okay, I've now I know all that. I've written it. There's like an unburdening of like amazing, sort of subconscious kind of it's all down now. Yeah. So what is this Gestalt thing? I don't think I know very much about this. So you explain to us what it is.
Gestalt is used in counselling and coaching, and basically the main idea is that you give someone space to talk without chipping in all the time. So it's very much about creating awareness for the person of what's going on for them, and that's usually done through them just talking. So when I coach someone, when I say I coach them in the Gestalt style, what I'm saying is I get there and they're doing most of the talking. I'll be watching them really closely to see if there's anything they say that sparks off an emotion for them, and I might say, okay, look, tell me a little bit more about that. And but the whole thing about Gestalt is that they do most of the talking, and there is so much more to it. So anybody listening to this who's a Gestalt analyst or sort of therapist will say, oh my God, it's so... But basically, and it's about understanding that change will come through awareness, not through forcing it. So it's, you know, most of the times when you'll hear people talk, they'll say things like, well, no, I'm talking about it. I've never thought about it like that. And it starts bringing out everything. So if you imagine it's very person-centred. So it's, you know, when some people go to counselling and they come back and they go, well, they didn't even do anything. It's a bit like that, but actually they do something, but it's just very subtle, and it's a little bit of steering in what you're picking up is important for them. So you watch it when you hear them say something and they get quite emotional. You think, well, tell me a little bit more about that. And it's not about going into getting them to cry and stuff like that. It's about understanding what's important for them. And then when it's all there and they've unpacked everything and they really, like you said, that unburdening, it's like, right, and then we go, okay, well, let's look at some things we can do to take this forward. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's always the stuff I never understood. You know, when I had counselling when me and my wife separated, and it was very much like that. And I came out going, I wanted a few tips, you know, like, how am I going to sleep at night? But actually by doing it, it just all started getting a bit better, and it's fascinating, yeah.
It sounds like it's something where it's actually really helped that you have these really good person skills, which maybe you've honed over years of doing performance and close-up magic and things like that. Do you feel like that's the case, that you know how to read people better, or were you always like that? Were you as good at people?
I think it's not, because it's that thing of reading people. I always have. I've never consciously done it. What I think it is being able to adapt to most types of people. And respect them without judging them. I think that's a lot of it. And I think as a street performer, and I think I had a bit of that anyway. I mean, I was going to be a care worker, so I always had a thing that I wanted to work with people. But I think as a magician and a street performer, you've got an audience of like 200 completely different types of people. So you have to learn how to create rapport with all those different types of people at once. And again, it's not something I sat down and worked out. It's something I practiced. And then after that, look back and say, okay, what was I doing in that situation? And I think with magic as well, you're going up to different types of people and creating rapport with them. Again, so if you could have an elderly couple that are very sort of well-to-do, and then you go up with a bunch of guys getting shit-faced, and it's being able to adapt to all those situations and see yourself in them as well. So I can see a part of me in all those different types of people. And again, one of the philosophies of Gestalt is that everybody is trying their best. Do you know what I mean? And it's a really healthy way of looking at it. So even if someone, to your mind, is being a complete arsehole, there's sometimes a motivation for that. And it's not letting them off the hook. I mean, you know what I mean? If someone's being horrible, but it's just trying to understand a bit more and trying to see it from a slightly more empathic viewpoint, I think. So I think that always helps, and I think I always had that ability to see the good in most people, which I think really helps when you're doing anything like coaching, performing, or anything. And I guess I've just always felt, since street performing, I've been confident in talking to people as well. So even though I'm a little bit of an introvert privately, I don't like big crowds. I don't really like going to clubs and stuff like that often, but I can walk into a social situation, and if I have to, switch it on quite easily and without being arrogant, sort of relate to most people in the room if I have to. So I think that's maybe something that I practiced and got better at.
One of the most important sort of tools in your career is other people, and being able to build a network and kind of, like you say, relate to people from lots of different backgrounds, but also realising that you have to give something. So it's like this sort of philosophy of generosity, if you like, where you have to, the more you give other people and help other people, you'll get even more back somehow. And it might not be in the way that you expect, and it might not be in the way that you want necessarily always. But eventually, by just being generous with your time, and, you know, like, and I always find this with you, actually, that if I ask you for a favour, or, you know, to come and help me out or do a podcast or whatever, you always say yes, pretty much, and you'll always spend, you know, half a day with me, and I just think, well, you know, there must be other things that you should be doing that probably make you more money. But it's but I appreciate that, and that always makes me think, oh, you know, if I get some money, I'll hire Steve for something. So it does work, I think.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that thing, that stuff that you're interested in. I think that so it's a really fine line, because I definitely have the philosophy of generosity, because I like to give my time, especially if it's projects that I'm interested in. But you've got to be very careful that people don't take the piss, and that's what I find difficult, because I'm a yes man. People ask me to do something, I say yes, but now I've learned to only say yes to the things that I feel interested in, and it's listening to my, you know, internal processes and going, what feels right. And I know you know these days when people are taking a piss. I know that because I've learned. So, you know, when someone, you know, says, oh, can you come and do this event, you know, you can see straight away whether they're just being tight or whether they genuinely would be really appreciative of your time. And, you always get the thing of going, there'll be loads of people there that you can network with. And I go, well, if I wanted to do that, I'd just go to a networking thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't have to do that on a Friday night.
Stop selling me so hard on this. Like, what are you trying to hide?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've had about 24 emails over the last 2 weeks being invited to India. And I'm like, yeah, great, what's the fee?
Yeah.
And then I get another email inviting me to India. And I'm like, this is great, but what's the fee? Or do you cover travel? And then I get another and it's this constant thing of yeah, but what's... we'll treat you very well. I'm sure you will. Actually, that's a given. I expect to be not treated hideously. It's, we're not going to pay you, but we won't treat you hideously. Or we'll give you food. Like, well, I expect that. Surely, So and I think that it's just getting a feel for the people that would be appreciative of what you do, and you getting some joy out of it as well. And I think that's a thing. You've got to be so careful, especially as a magician. You get invited to a lot of parties you wouldn't have been invited to. It's like people that you've known for one day. You go, no, we're having a party. Do you want to come?
Oh no! Yeah. Oh no!
Yeah,
that's awful.
I think a good close-up magician is someone that people like. That's pretty much it. And obviously you've got to have brilliant tricks and you've got to have the skills and you can't just go and buy a crappy trick that everybody can do. You've got to have all that as well. But it is about rapport, and it's about, you're interrupting people's meals a lot of the time, or their conversations. So very quickly you have to make them feel like you're not interrupting them. So whether that's gauging the situation and adapting and being flexible. So again, it's approaching one couple differently than you would another couple. And and if you are interrupting and saying something like, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if I don't, I just look a bit weird walking around on my own. That sort of stuff, to acknowledge what they're feeling. And it's all those little skills that I think you pick up that makes a good magician. And I don't think there's enough with those social skills. I think there's a lot of magicians that are very good technically, but really need to look at, how they're approaching people, have an awareness of the situation and how they fit into it. And of course, ego is a massive problem with magicians as well. So it becomes about them being clever and looking clever rather than about what the person is experiencing. So.
In fact, I think it was Penn Jillette on a podcast, and he was saying something about how magic is basically about being a dick. It's like you go up and just go, "Hey, I'm cleverer than you."
I know. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. I think didn't Seinfeld do a similar thing as well? He did.
Maybe.
Hey, hi, I'm cleverer than you. You're stupid. Yeah, which is how it can come across if you don't.
Yeah.
See, I think self-depreciation is really, if you use it properly in magic, it's very important. It's actually saying to them, I'm just about to do something. If I don't do it right, you might feel really stupid, so don't. And you're saying that but in a very different way, but it's creating a thing of if I fool you, that's not you being fooled, it's just a trick. It's everybody gets fooled by this. So you have to really cover that stuff, I think, in a subtle way and make people feel comfortable with what you're doing. And there are a lot of magicians that are really arrogant and, but hey-ho. I'm a facilitator and I can run a 10-day leadership program called Integral Leadership, which has been running for like 13 years. 2,000 people have been through it. And it's a personal development course, really. So it's working within organisations with managers, but mainly on their communication skills and how they relate to people, how they relate to their teams. So we do, the first 2 days we spend is just, because it runs 2 days a month. And I now take people through actually 1 day a month for 6 months, so individuals. But we work a lot on unpacking who you are, what makes you tick, what doesn't make you tick, what your little annoyances are, what the things that you respond to and how you respond to different situations, and then look at maybe other people. And we do a little bit of typology stuff, so it's like understanding that some people react from the head, heart or gut. This stuff goes back thousands of years, and some people are very thought so they'll start thinking about stuff really pragmatically before they make a decision. Some people just go for it, and some people will work on their emotions. And even when you start talking about, you'll get people going, I work with this guy, and of course he's a head guy, because, every time we do something, he has to think through it and get all the facts, and I'm very much heart, so that straight away you can see people like going, that's why we don't, so we do a little bit of unpacking of that, and then we do lots of stuff about people's values, what your values are you living in congruence with your values, and then we do presentations. So it's mostly those soft skills that actually, if you start looking at them, the other stuff becomes a lot easier. It's building the foundation of, so it's not about changing your personality, but it's about taking behaviours that you want to improve and maybe working on them to create a balance in how you're approaching different problems and situations. So, yeah, and there are processes in it. We do a process where we talk people through, how to have a successful meeting without wasting 2 hours of people's times. Because that's one of the main problems in organisations is people are wasting time doing stuff they don't have to do. They're sitting in meetings for 2 hours where they don't even need to be there. So it's creating that culture of not time wasting and kind of being open with people and saying, is it okay if I don't come to this because I don't need to, and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely work on creating cultures in organisations as well, rather than that's the individual and then the bigger picture of creating cultures where it's very creative. So we work with Immediate Media at the moment down in London, who publish Radio Times and Top Gear magazine, and we've they've put 300 of their managers through the course, and now the whole of that culture is changing slowly to become more open and communicative and all that, and they're working in conjunction with us to do that. So that's really, really, really nice to see.
To give us one practical tip, so if you're going into a meeting, what would be a good way, I suppose, as a boss, to make sure that meeting is effective? I
mean, the pragmatic things are making sure someone's taking minutes, making sure that whoever's chairing the meeting is chairing it and not doing everything else. But the main thing is keeping on agenda, having your agenda points, having them up on the wall, and the minute someone comes off agenda, you say, we'll park it, we'll come back to it later. And because meetings become about people liking the sound of their own voice, bringing in the people that aren't saying much every now and then, have you got anything to say? But I think the main thing is, it is that thing of keeping to what you're doing. It's like, I'm the worst at just going off on one. As you know by this podcast, you ask me a question and 2 seconds later I'm talking about something completely different. But it's having someone chairing that and making sure that's the case. So, and I think the most healthy thing, and it's not really meetings, but it's more creative meetings as well, is not being scared to be wrong. When you're trying to come up with ideas for something, I think the biggest stifler of creativity is being so scared you're going to sound stupid. So you might come up with something that sounds good to you, but you go, oh yeah, they might think I'm a dick by saying that. And I think if you can create a culture, whether it's in a team of 2 or 200, of it's okay to chuck your ideas out there. If we kind of come up, let's really brainstorm. And that's proper brainstorming. It's not about, because even when people do that, they're still holding back a little bit a lot of the time. But it's saying that thing, if it's okay to, it's like comedy writing, right? It's okay if you've got a load of people, it's okay to come out with crap gags as well. Let's just get them all there, because that might spark off something else. And so I think that, in creative meetings, that, really have that freedom, and time restricted usually as well, which is good.
This one I always hear is make sure, as soon as you go into any meeting, say, what is the purpose of this meeting?
Absolutely.
Which I think is brilliant, because I don't think I've ever been in a meeting where that's happened. And also, I don't know if I'd ever be confident enough to do that to somebody, to say, okay, what are you trying to, you're just meeting with one person, what are you getting out of this? Just so I know before we have... It feels very un-British somehow. It's very confrontational to do that, but...
Yeah, I think there's ways of... I think there's a model we use on the programme, which is called the target model, which is like a checklist of when you're having an interaction with someone. If it goes wrong, you can sort of think about it and go, why is it going wrong? So if you haven't got rapport with someone, then usually the next stuff doesn't work right. So you might have to spend a bit more time meeting someone. But one of the main ones is being in the right emotional state for the meeting as well, like making sure you're not just getting straight in there without really thinking about it, having a real good idea, and actually, like you said, maybe before the meeting, saying to someone, okay, we're having this meeting, but what do you want out of this? Give it to them and make sure that's in line with what you want out of it, because a lot of time people will be meeting up with 2 totally different agendas and they don't know until they've got, so I think there's a lot of pre-preparation that can save so much time.
Do you have kind of a long-term... You say you're at university at the moment, you're doing a master's in coaching and mentoring, you said? Do you have a long-term goal for do you kind of do a 5-year plan and a 2-year plan?
When things start feeling like a bit unplanned, I sit down and do a thing called a Fishbone Model, which is a very simple cause and effect outcomes model. So it's basically at one end it's sort of in the shape of a fishbone. I mean, there's very complex ones online. I think it's called the Ishikawa model or something, but Toyota use it and people like that, I think. But it's basically on one end you've got where you want to be or what you want to get, and it can be something really random like feeling content, and then on all the different bones you've got all those things you need to do to feel content. So it's usually the areas of your life. So it'll be health, family, work, all the different aspects of your work, or you can do one specifically for work. So someone like me and you, where we're doing all sorts of stuff, it's getting it all on paper and just first of all making sure you're spending your time doing the right stuff, but also I tend to sort of go, okay, where do I want to be in a few months? I've got a longer term plan, as in I want to be doing a lot more coaching and have a lot more leadership courses running and less magic, and that's it. So at the moment I'm really working on, like I said, sort of steeping myself in the world of coaching, mentoring and leadership, and making sure that 2 weeks later I'm not playing the piano for 3 hours a day. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I do. I do a lot of short-term goal setting, and I do a lot of play as well. I make sure that I sit down and read for a few hours because it doesn't feel like work. So if I'm not careful, I'll feel like that's skiving. But actually it's really important to just go online and search for different coaching stuff, or look at different models and look at leadership stuff and watch stuff on YouTube, and that's really important because or TED Talks and things like that. So it's making sure I play within that as well and explore, and don't just get too hung up on I want to achieve this by then. So I do a bit of both. It's a real balance.
Your talk on focus, that you've been doing a talk recently.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of focus-related insights that you think are important to share?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really, and it's a whole different subject, because I think that for someone like me and you, I think I'm quite geeky about technology, and I love all the era we're living in now is so fascinating and so amazing that we've got the information, access to so much information. I love my iPhone, I love iPads, I love all that stuff, but I think it's having a huge detrimental effect on productivity and focus. And it's with me, and I'm talking to other people and starting to research it a little bit, it's starting to really go a little bit out of control, I think. So I think what we have to do is go back, and it's simple stuff, but go back to stuff like blocking out periods of time when you're not, especially for someone who's a freelancer, that your phone is in literally another room. If you want to work on something for an hour, like a talk or something creative, and by creative I think it could be creating a spreadsheet. It's not all about sort of arty stuff, but something where you need to get into that flow state of learning or practicing something or putting something together. Then I have a huge problem my phone will beep and I'll look at it and I'll get in a vortex of Facebook for half an hour, and everybody's doing it, and it's becoming more acceptable to do that. And I think organisations are starting to see the change. What's happening now is that people are losing focus. I mean, like in 2005, there was a really famous study in California where they studied like hundreds and hundreds of employees, and they were finding out that after 11 minutes, they were on project for 11 minutes before being interrupted. Okay, and they're losing 2.5 hours for interruptions. And that was a year before Twitter.
Oh my God.
So, and that was happening in 2005, and obviously it's getting worse. And they did a really recent study in London where they found out that multitasking with our devices while at work was having a more detrimental effect on our IQ than marijuana. So, and it sounds mental, but if you think about it, it totally does. I've lost days before where I've been working, but I've kind of been going back on my phone and back to work, back on my phone, and then by the end of it, I look at it and go, what have I haven't really got anywhere because I've been faffing around. So I think it's all about awareness. I think the main thing with distraction and focus is understanding what your main distractions are. And it's a really interesting thing when you start writing it down. So in my talk, I've got a list that I put up on the PowerPoint of what my distractions are on a day-to-day basis. And there's about like 35 things on there. When you look at every notification, obviously going into your own procrastination habits and being aware of them. So I think the first key is awareness. Become really aware of when you procrastinate, how you procrastinate, what your times you procrastinate, what sort of things you procrastinate on, and then trying to and once you're aware of it, you can start doing things to try and sort of get over it then. But I think awareness of it is the key.